Moon Knight. Let's cut right to the chase. Disney Plus show is now out, and you want to learn about the comics? Here's the history of Moon Knight in the comics. I am reading every single appearance Moon Knight has. I'm Haussmann. These are some older videos. I've edited out a lot of the parts that aren't necessary, and this is just the straight appearances. So enjoy. Back on May 27th, 1975, Doug Moench and Don Perlin were on Werewolf by Night. Werewolf by Night is its own thing. They created Moon Knight as an antagonist to Werewolf by Night. And it starts off in the middle of a fight, Moon Knight just kicking the crap out of a previously injured Werewolf by Night. Mark Spector is the man that will go on to become Moon Knight. He was hired by the committee for his skills. Basically, he's a mercenary. He was hired by the committee to take out Werewolf by Night for them, to bring him in. And they gave him this costume, the Moon Knight costume, and they gave him a bunch of silver weapons because werewolves are immune to silver. And Moon Knight goes, and he's like, yeah, okay, and he takes the job. And even right here in his very first appearance, he's got a buddy flying a helicopter for him. That's Frenchie. Frenchie and the helicopter would be a mainstay for Moon Knight, for his entire career. So over 2 issues, he beats up the werewolf, and he brings him in and has him locked in a cage, and the committee's like, okay, we're gonna take care of this guy now. And I can't remember, they're doing some ritual or something, and Moon Knight's like, well, you paid me to bring him in, you didn't pay me to keep him here. And then the moon comes out and he starts turning into a werewolf, and they kick open the cage, and Werewolf by Night and Moon Knight beat the crap out of the committee together, and Moon Knight goes off, and he's like, oh, maybe I'm not a bad guy. Maybe I am. I don't know. Moon Knight appears a little while later in Werewolf by Night again, but it's just like a Werewolf by Night is hallucinating a bunch of his former adversaries, so it's not actually Moon Knight. So it doesn't really count, but he was there, briefly. Roughly a year later, in the spring of 1976, Doug Moench and Don Perlin were together again on Marvel Spotlight, where they got 2 issues that they got to dedicate to Moon Knight, and they really helped to flush the character out a bit more here. Ultimately took on this weird guy called the Conquer Lord. He was basically just fighting crime, much like Batman. But here they developed a lot more of his character. He was actually, you rarely see him as Mark Spector. He was Moon Knight most of the time, and then when he wasn't being Moon Knight, Frenchie would fly his helicopter up to the mansion, and Moon Knight would jump out into a fountain on the rooftop and then swim under a passageway and come up into this bathtub in his bedroom as Stephen Grant. And Stephen Grant was Bruce Wayne, I guess. Stephen Grant is this rich socialite because Moon Knight knows that a lot of these crime bosses and dirty deals and stuff are made at these fancy parties. So Moon Knight can't go to the fancy parties. I guess Mark Spector couldn't either, so he took a lot of the fortune he made as Mark Spector mercenary and created the persona of Stephen Grant. And Stephen Grant has a girlfriend, Marlene. Now, she knows everything that's going on, so it's not like, a whole secret identity from her. She's the girlfriend of this rich socialite, and she's kind of meant to be the eye candy while he goes to these parties to not draw attention. It is a legitimate relationship, but she is only in a relationship with Stephen Grant. She's not in a relationship with Moon Knight, though she does help him. She's certainly not in a relationship with Mark Spector, as she calls him Stephen all the time. She never calls him Mark. She doesn't know about his other personality because she always gets disappointed when she shows up. It's like, oh, Stephen, are you taking me to a party tonight? And he's like, no, because he has another personality. Because as some of these deals are done at the big fancy parties where Stephen Grant can go, a lot of the other stuff is street level, underground. Puts on an old cap and messes up his hair and dresses down a bit and takes on the name Jake Lockley, where he goes and drives a taxi. And as Jake Lockley, he's got a couple of informants that aren't really informants. He goes to one diner where the waitress Gina hears a lot of things, and then there's also this, I believe, homeless guy. They don't necessarily, down on his luck, homeless-ish person named Crawley, and they're both introduced in this issue, and they are mainstays of the series as well. And that's where he gets a lot of his lower-level information. And the other, Jake Lockley has a job as a cab driver, and his boss is like, you can't just come and go whenever you please, you got to make me money. So, I guess even when he's not particularly looking for information on a case, he is off driving a cab, and that is something that would really define the character going forward. He's got these different characters he plays. That's all they are right now, are characters. They aren't personalities, but I guess when people talk about Moon Knight being the crazy superhero, it's because down the road, and we will get to it, he does crack and he loses touch on which personalities are which, and which one's the real him. And as I said, in these first, all these issues we're covering, we don't ever really see him as Mark Spector. Much. We do a bit. So as I said, Marvel Spotlight didn't nothing really special with the story, but it did a lot to establish who Moon Knight was, who Frenchie was, who Steve Grant was, who Jake Lockley was, who Mark Spector was, who Marlene was. Because it really built up his supporting cast and showed a lot that he's got these different identities that he uses. On top of that, he just fought the Conquer Lord, who I don't even know if ever came back, but there was alligator pits and giant chess pieces, just standard 1970s Marvel fare. It was fun. It was a great read. I highly recommend it, just for building up who Moon Knight is. After that, it was about another year before Moon Knight showed up again, and he showed up in The Defender. In about 5 issues that were written by John Warner, David Kraft, Roger Silver. Not exactly sure who wrote it. They were kind of all over the place. This David Kraft actually wrote it and did the colors, which is really neat. You don't see that a lot. He did colors in some of the issues. It's really nothing. Doesn't do anything to build Moon Knight's character. He just kind of is there the entire time. He comes along and he's trying to save this guy. And there's Nick Fury's involved and there's a whole thing. And then he gets tied up with the Defenders, who then go to fight the Avengers and then go off and fight the Zodiac. Nothing, like I said, nothing really of note happens. Over 5 issues, Moon Knight is just kind of there. He does some neat stuff. He goes toe-to-toe with the Hulk for a minute. At one point he does say, I'm kind of a lone wolf, but if I was going to join a team, it'd probably be a team like this. And then he didn't. So that's good. And that was really just 5 issues with Moon Knight in them. Kept him relevant, I guess. Didn't really build his character, didn't do anything to make his popularity soar, but it just got more eyes on the character, which was always good. And then the summer of 1978 would get what I call his first big team-up. Being in issues with the Defenders and the Avengers was something, but no, his first big team-up came with Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, in issues 22 and 23 of that series. So these Spidey issues were written by Bill Mantlo with art by Mike Zeck, and they were actually pretty good. It goes like most team-ups do. They have a little confusion, and Spider-Man and Moon Knight fight, and then they're like, wait, we're both good guys, so hey, let's go be good guys and go get the bad guy. So yeah, this one again features Jake Lockley. He comes across a situation where he knows this guy's got information on the Magia, so he turns into Moon Knight, and he's going and shaking the guy down for information, and Spider-Man's like, stop it, and he starts taking him on, and Moon Knight's like, no, get out of here, and I'm fighting back, and then Spider-Man's like, oh god, why are we fighting? And Spider-Man even thinks to himself, he's like, I'm fighting Moon Knight. Like, Moon Knight's supposed to be a good guy. Why am I doing this? And Moon Knight's just like, this dick attacked me, so I'm fighting him back. So they have a little fight, and then they're interrupted by the Cyclone. They get blown away by the Cyclone. He's a villain. Cyclone wipes the floor with Moon Knight and Spider-Man, and then afterwards they get up, they get together, and Moon Knight's like, you know we're on the same side, Spider-Man. Like, don't fight me. And then the team-up begins. Frenchie in the helicopter takes them up to the mansion, and Moon Knight dives down into his fountain and up into his bedroom. He's like, Marlene, we're going to have some company. So get out of here. Spider-Man shows up, and they go down to his moon cave. It's not really a moon cave, but I mean, he's got a giant moon computer. Once again, he doesn't have a moon computer, I'm just calling it that. He's got a big computer with all the crime on it, and it's very Batman-y. What I really like here is, like, they're not buddy-buddy. Like, Moon Knight's not just like, hey, pal, come on in and share everything. Moon Knight's like, no, I know we gotta go here, because this is where I keep my information. And Spider-Man's like, well, that's a big computer. You must be rich. And Moon Knight's like, get out of my business, all right? You know, like, I got my secrets. Just stay out of them, or I'll start prying into yours. I mean, they are allies, but they're not like best friends. It's really good. I really like the characterization. And even still, this shows that Moon Knight isn't perfect. Like, he's got this big map of the Magia, and he's got, like, Hammerhead and Silvermane and Kingpin, and Spider-Man's thinking to himself. And also, Spider-Man's not offering this information up. Spider-Man's just like, Silvermane's in the hospital and Kingpin's dead. Like, maybe this Moon Knight doesn't know what he's doing. And then they go and they beat up the bad guys and they stop Cyclone. Was there ever a doubt? They team up, they work really well, and they're like, hey, they gain a mutual respect for each other, and they go on. More importantly, this appearance in Spider-Man was, once again, a little bit of a boost, showing that Moon Knight is out there, because it rolled right into his appearances in the B stories of the Hulk magazine that started the next month, with Doug Moench back. So Hulk magazine was Rampaging Hulk. It was renamed at issue 10 to be Hulk magazine, and with that actually it also got color. It was just a bigger, shinier magazine-style comic book. Hulk magazine was playing off the popularity of the Hulk TV series, so there's an editorial diction for more human interest-driven stories with no supporting cast, no guest stars, and no supervillains, like kind of just keeping it like what the Hulk show was. I don't know if that came across to the Moon Knight backup stories as well, but it did. I don't know if that was supposed to, but there were no team-ups, there were no supervillains, anything like that. It was a more human-driven story with the Moon Knight, which I think is good and bad. I enjoy getting more about Moon Knight's character, but like when he's teaming up with Spider-Man, fighting supervillains, like that is where I think Moon Knight shines, absolutely. He's a colorful character. He deserves to be in this Marvel world with all these other colorful characters. Again, written by Doug Moench, with some of the art by Gene Colan and Tony Dezuniga. And it's really good. There's good stuff, but with issue 13, Bill Sienkiewicz became the artist. That's when the final piece clicked into place for Moon Knight. This art is astounding. This is some of the best Moon Knight stuff I've seen, and Bill Sienkiewicz would go on to be one of the main Moon Knight artists for years to come. Other artists had done it before, like where Moon Knight's cape is the shape of a moon. I read back everything, and I saw it, and I just didn't really notice it. It doesn't stand out, but as soon as Bill Sienkiewicz starts doing it, it's like, wow. You really notice it. Like, Sienkiewicz didn't invent the idea, but he absolutely perfected it. That said, these Hulk backup stories are nothing special. They do once again, they just do more to develop Jake Lockley and Stephen Grant, the personas, and establish what Moon Knight is, but he's basically off just fighting normal guys. They do reference that he does have some superpowers that are connected to the moon. They don't really say what that is, so you can kind of just assume it's heightened strength, heightened agility, things like that. More than Batman has. And there's one really good story. It's just a standalone story where he is out at someone's house to observe the lunar eclipse. And he goes out in the woods, and there's 3 guys trying to break into the house, so Moon Knight goes out and he stops them, but there's also something else that kicks the crap out of him in one punch. And you don't really know what's happening. And then in the Hulk story, I believe from the same issue, you get the other side of that story. And Hulk is out in the woods, and these 3 guys are there, and he kind of just beats the crap out of Moon Knight in one panel. Like, it's okay, it's not that good. Retelling it back is actually not that good. It's interesting how we get to see the story from both sides, but it's ultimately a nothing story. It's Moon Knight in the woods. He beats up one guy, Hulk beats up 2, Hulk punches him. In his issue, you never realize it's the Hulk, and in Hulk's issue, you never realize it's Moon Knight. So you can read them independently and not know. It seemed cool while I was reading it. Saying it back doesn't sound cool at all. Forget it. Ignore it. Forget I said anything. Jeez. But in the middle of these magazine issues, the magazine was coming out every 2 months, and in the middle of that, in the summer of 1979, Moon Knight got to team up with The Thing in Marvel 2-in-1 number 52, which is actually the first appearance of the villain Crossfire. Marvel 2-in-1 was basically Thing team-up at this point in time, so he teamed up with The Thing. So Moon Knight teamed up with The Thing in an issue written by Stephen Grant. That's awesome. With art by Jim Craig and P. Marcos. The issue starts with the Thing fighting some bad guys, and Moon Knight shows up to help him, and the Thing is like, who needs you? Get out of here. Nobody wants your help. He's like, oh, come on, I'm Moon Knight, I'm helping. And he's like, no, get out of here. And they save the day, and the cops show up, and Moon Knight takes off, and the Thing is like, whatever, that guy sucks. We don't need him. And yeah, and then afterwards, the Thing's got to go track down some leads. He's having trouble finding a ride, and up pulls a cab. So he's like, oh, sweet, I found a cab. And he hops in, and it's Jake Lockley, and Jake Lockley drives him to the site, and then Thing goes inside to fight some more bad guys, and all of a sudden Moon Knight shows up again. He's like, well, how did you follow me here? What the heck? And they beat up some more bad guys, then they come across Crossfire, and Moon Knight in his head is like, man, I know that guy. And it's turns out to be this guy he knew back in his CIA days. Nothing really comes of it, but it's just interesting that they're shedding a bit more light on Moon Knight's past. Yeah, and the whole thing has like a playful back and forth where the Thing is kind of like, I'm made of rock and these guys are shooting guns, like, I don't need your help. And Moon Knight's like, no, I'm helping. We're buddies, it's good. Eventually, he does gain the respect of the Thing. They defeat all the bad guys, they go, and the Thing's like, man, I'm gonna have a hard time catching a cab on the way home. And Moon Knight's like, I don't think it'll be so hard. Just a fun issue, once again, putting Moon Knight right in the center of the Marvel Universe of all these colorful characters, like Moon Knight is one of them. Interestingly enough, as I said, it was written by Stephen Grant, and Stephen Grant is the only Moon Knight persona not to come out in that issue. Interesting. So after that, there were a few more Hulk issues in 15, 17, 18, and 20, and pretty much one every 4 months we're getting a Moon Knight appearance. One of them is actually a really good story. This maniac goes and buys a mask and a hatchet, and he's kind of just, they call him like the Hatchet Man, and he's just killing nurses, and he's killed 8 or 9 already, and Marlene's like, well, if you're going to fight this guy and investigate this, then I'm coming too. And Moon Knight's like, I really don't want you to, and she's like, no, but I'm doing it, so whatever. And she goes and gets a nurse costume and goes out, and Moon Knight is having like these flashbacks because he knows this guy, like this guy is out specifically looking for him. He's killing these nurses to send a message to him, more, not to Moon Knight, to Mark Spector. Then he goes out, and Marlene gets shot. This guy grabs her. Moon Knight wasn't there quick enough. The police shoot at the guy and end up shooting Marlene. Moon Knight's like, well, that sucks. And he kind of knocks the cops back. And this hatchet man ends up sticking his hatchet right in Marlene's back. And it does not look good. And Moon Knight yells at the police. He's like, you get her to the hospital. And they're like, we're not listening to you. He's like, get her to the goddamn hospital. And they're like, okay, fine. And they get her to the hospital. And Moon Knight goes and he's like, I am Mark Spector. Come get me, Randall Spector. Like, and it's like, whoa, what? So this Hatchet guy is Moon Knight's brother. And then more flashbacks to when they were kids and stuff. And it's like this whole thing. And he's like, you have snapped. You are crazy. I gotta take you out. And he doesn't want to fight him, but he does. And it ends up, he ends up dying. Not Moon Knight. Randall Spector dies. He comes at Moon Knight. Moon Knight doesn't want to fight him, so Moon Knight ducks out of the way. He trips, falls off the roof, and lands and impales himself on a tree. And that was neat. It was, like I said, a really good issue. Then the next story after that is a pretty good one as well. Marlene is dying in the hospital, and the nurse is like, it's touch and go. We don't know. We will know by morning if she's going to make it or not. And that just kind of shows us Moon Knight's night. And he deals with a lot of darkness in New York. Just some petty crime, stuff like that. He stops it, but then there's also people using drugs. And he's like, oh. He finds a kid that overdoses, and he's like, that kid's not going to learn a lesson. He's going to get back on drugs. He finds a homeless guy begging for money. He gives him some money. It was like, that guy's just going to go get drunk. He'll be drunk in 10 minutes instead of finding a nice warm place to sleep. There's a pimp that's like, pushing around his hooker, and Moon Knight's like, hey, knock it off. And the hooker turns around and is like, get the hell out of my business. The Moon Knight's like, oh, this city sucks, man. And then he goes back to the hospital as the sun starts coming up and learns that Marlene is going to be okay. So I said there was some really good character stuff happening in those Hulk issues. And then there was Marvel Preview number 21. Again, Doug Moench and Bill Sienkiewicz. They got together and wrote this story. Once again, just a basic Moon Knight story. Nothing too extravagant, no guest stars, nothing special. It was in black and white. It was reprinted in color later. But it was Marvel Preview. It was just another magazine still. And that one kind of was to whet the appetite, saying, look, these guys are coming, because later this year there's a Moon Knight ongoing series by Moench and Sienkiewicz. So I'm not sure if the Marvel Preview 21 was a trial for the creative team to see if they could pull off another Moon Knight story, even though they've been doing it the whole time. I think it was more of a coming out to the world saying, listen, here's Moon Knight. There's going to be a Moon Knight ongoing series by these two. Get ready for it. But before Moon Knight's ongoing series, he would appear one more time in Captain America number 245. And this one's kind of interesting because Moon Knight doesn't actually appear. Captain America goes to a diner, and he's sitting in a diner, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, Captain America's in this diner. And in the background, this guy is like, whoa, I'm hungry. Captain America's like, oh, how's it going? I'll have a piece of American apple pie. And everybody's like, oh, Captain America, this is great. And you just see the whole time this guy in the background's like, what, am I invisible? Do I not exist? I just want a coffee. Like, does this place even serve food? And he's getting cranky, and then Captain America's like, hey, this guy's my friend here. Serve this guy something too. And he's like, okay, I'll have a piece of pie if it's good enough for Captain America. And I know what you're thinking, like, what does this have to do with anything? Well, eventually Captain America finishes up and goes outside, and everybody's still like, I can't believe Captain America ate at my diner. Wow. And then the guy that was all surly inside is sitting by a cab, and he's like, hey, Captain America, my friend, do you need a ride? And Captain America's like, yeah, can you take me to Brooklyn or whatever? He's like, okay, I sure can. By the way, my name's Jake Lockley. And this is like in the first 4 pages of the issue. So then I read the rest of the issue, and Moon Knight does not show up. Steve Grant doesn't show up. Mark Spector doesn't show up. Jake Lockley does not show up again. I don't know what to tell you. And it's not just a coincidence that there's some guy named Jake Lockley driving a cab. Like, he looks just like they draw Jake Lockley in the Moon Knight comics. So I don't know if editorial was like, we got a Moon Knight comic coming soon. Everybody's got to get this Moon Knight character in there. And Roger McKenzie, the writer, was just like, oh, I'll find a way to sneak him in there without doing it. Or maybe Roger McKenzie was just like, I'm a fan of this. Like, I would love to know the story behind it because it's really interesting. With his 23rd appearance, it was also the first issue of his own Moon Knight series by Doug Moench and Bill Sienkiewicz. And we get Moon Knight's origin. So we learn the background. Mark Spector was just Mark Spector. He was a mercenary for hire working with Frenchie and Bushman in Africa somewhere. And then Marlene is there and her dad. And there's this whole thing where they uncover the tomb of Konchu and they're going to kill... Marlene's dad actually does get killed. And she feels like Mark Spector was responsible for it. He wasn't, and he's trying to be a better man because he's not a good guy. He's a mercenary for hire. He's trying to be a better man, and he actually goes against Bushman and gets killed, seemingly. He passes out in the desert, and some guys throw him down in front of the statue of Konchu, and one guy checks him and confirms he's dead. Marlene's trapped in there as well. It's at this point that Konchu, chooses Mark Spector and brings him back to life, but it's really... Nobody confirmed he was dead. Just one guy said he's dead. Nobody actually confirmed he's dead. And that's something that comes out through this whole run. Is Konchu real, or is this all in Mark's head? He puts on Konchu's cloak and goes and chases down Bushman and beats the crap out of him and saves the day. And him and Marlene are like, oh, hello, let's be boyfriend-girlfriend, I guess. He decides to go back to New York and become this crime fighter, Moon Knight. So he... and he decides then and there he's got to create these different identities. He needs to, because Mark Spector can't do all this. He needs to be Stephen Grant, the money guy. And he needs to be Jake Lockley to get his ear to the street. So that's when we see the dawning of these three personas becoming Moon Knight. It's actually, that one's a really good issue. So issue 2 is another really good one. It's Moench and Sienkiewicz again. These are all going to be Moench and Sienkiewicz unless I specify otherwise. They stayed on for almost all the series. We'll get to it. Issue 2 was really good. Moon Knight takes on the Skid Row Slasher. Basically, there is a guy going around killing homeless people. If you remember from the last video, one of Jake Lockley's friends is Crawley. Bertrand Crawley. He's a homeless guy who gives him information. So obviously the threat is to him. Gina's diner shows up again, and in this one, actually, Jake Lockley just drops all pretenses. He brings in Gina and her 2 kids and Crawley to his house, and he's like, this is where I live. I'm Stephen Grant, but also I'm Moon Knight. And he's like, you guys help me out. And I guess you probably haven't been realizing it, but you've been helping me out as Moon Knight, so I want to start actually paying you for this. He hires Gina's kids to give him information. He hires Crawley to give him information. Doesn't mention paying Gina, but he brings them all into the fold, so they're actually a part of Team Moon Knight. And Crawley is kind of gets this one moment where he's like, oh, this is great. I just needed to get a stable job to get out of this gutter and, not be homeless and be a good person again. And Moon Knight's like, well, no, you get more information when you're homeless, so I need you to stay homeless. And Crawley's like, yeah, okay. It ends up going on to this story. I don't want to give too much away, but I'm about to, so spoiler alert for this comic from 1980. They go and they end up finding that this guy is looking for Crawley specifically, and it's because Crawley is his dad who abandoned him and his mother when he was a kid, so he grew up and kind of went crazy and wanted to kill homeless people until he could find his dad and kill him. He ends up fighting with Moon Knight and getting knocked off a roof and dying, and Crawley is like, oh. It's actually a really heartfelt issue. Like, I'm not doing it justice here. So many of these issues are actually amazing and worth reading. Comic book storytelling in the late 70s and early 80s was very different than it is now. Some of these things are told in one issue that now would be dragged out over at least 6 issues. Like, there is dense storytelling packed into one issue. And Sinkowitz's art just absolutely sells it. I'm going to go on more about that later, I'm sure. Issue 3, we see Moon Knight versus the first appearance of the Midnight Man. Midnight Man is just a thief. This one actually gives us a really good juxtaposition of Moon Knight and Stephen Grant. We see a lot of Stephen Grant's relationship with Marlene, and actually how Marlene does come to help Moon Knight. That's really about it. I think this one's the one where we learn where Frenchie is actually the one that builds and takes care of the helicopter as well. I guess at the end we also do see Mark Spector bought a bunch of art and donated it under the name Mark Spector. He doesn't do much by Mark Spector, as we learned in these comic books. Like, Stephen Grant and Jake Lockley all have their place. That's the other really interesting thing when you talk about Moon Knight's alternate personalities. Like, Frenchie only refers to him as Mark. Marlene only refers to him as Stephen Grant. Gina and Crawley only refer to him as Jake. Like, they see him as Jake. Marlene sees him as Stephen, like, no matter who he is. And then Frenchie just always knows him as Mark Spector because he knew him before everything. Issue 4 actually retcons his first appearance a little bit. We learn that it was Frenchie that went to the committee and convinced them to hire Mark Spector to take on Werewolf by Night, and actually gave him the costume and everything, and was like, here, give him this and tell him to be Moon Knight. Just kind of retconning his origin to line up more with the origin they set up in Moon Knight number 1. Other than that, the committee hires a bunch of guys to take him out. Nothing fancy. And Moon Knight wins. Issue 5 is one of those ones that's kind of nothing. Moon Knight goes to a haunted house to track down a couple of criminals, and they think he's a ghost, and nothing, really. Issue 6 is a good one for all the identity stuff. He's also got a butler, Samuels, who kind of knows everything, but it's really minor character, but he's like, oh, and Moon Knight comes home, and he's like, oh, Mr. Moon Knight, a letter came for you. And then he takes off his mask, and he's like, well, no, I'm not Moon Knight, I'm Steven now. He's like, oh, well, this telegram came for Mark Spector, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll read it to him. Really shows how he just differentiates the second he takes off the mask, you know? And he goes in, he's talking to Marlene, he puts on his Jake Lockley costume, he's like, yeah, I'm Jake Lockley now, like, I'm gonna go get some food at the diner. And Marlene's like, oh, man. But they end up going to some tropical island on vacation to call in this favor that Mark Spector had. Once again, nothing major.
One other fun fact of note in issue 6 is that Moon Knight makes reference to the fact that his strength that he got from being bitten by the werewolf has finally worn off. So I guess he did have some enhanced strength from being bitten by Werewolf by Night. I'm not sure if that was referenced earlier or if I just missed it, but there it is.
Issue 7, again, it's not like nothing groundbreaking. It does just more to establish the characters and everything like that. A phenomenal story. Just a story. It doesn't do anything in the grand scheme of anything. It's just a story. If nothing else, issue 7 did establish that Jake Lockley has now got a new fake mustache. There's something in the drinking water that kind of makes everybody go crazy. Moon Knight is kind of running around the city beating the crap out of everybody, trying not to get people to drink the water, and cell phones aren't really a thing, so he can't just phone Marlene and be like, hey, don't drink the water. And she does. He actually has to fight with her. He has to fight with Frenchie. And it spills over into issue 8, and it's just more of the same thing. Once again, like, it's really good. Nothing special happened. The Mooncopter crashed. I think that was the second Mooncopter already. We'll get a new Mooncopter right away. Maybe that was the third Mooncopter.
In issue 9, we get some really great character work. Mark sees that Bushman has escaped from prison, and then the Midnight Man returns, and he's mad at Moon Knight for stopping him last time. He actually steals the statue of Konchu from Stephen Grant's house. We've established in earlier issues that Grant took the original statue of Konchu back, and he's got it in his house, and it kind of creeps Marlene out. Midnight Man steals that, and he's actually working with Bushman, and he smashes the statue, and Moon Knight, he manages to save the day that day, like Samuels is kidnapped, and he saves them before they drown, but then he just really has his first mental breakdown. And that carries over into issue 10. Like with Konchu destroyed, he doesn't know, he doesn't have a purpose, he doesn't know what to do. And he actually just kind of wanders off into the streets, and he's like, I'm not Jake Lockley, I'm not Moon Knight, I'm not Stephen Grant, I'm just Mark Spector, a broken man. And he disappears for a few days, and everybody's out looking for him. Gina and Crawley finally find him, and they bring him back, and he's like, he's really just down on himself. He doesn't know what to do. Like, without Konchu, he has no guidance. He has no reason to be Moon Knight. Marlene actually ends up revealing, he's like, oh, you know what, I had a plaster statue made, and that's the one they smashed. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And he gets his confidence back. He becomes Moon Knight again. And he goes and beats the crap out of Bushman and saves the day. And then he comes back home and he actually questions to Marlene. He's like, did you have the statue made before or after? Like, is this the fake that you're telling me is the real one now? Or was it the fake that was smashed? And she's like, don't worry about it. And he's like, you know what? You're right. I don't really need the answer anyway. And that goes to bring further questioning into whether or not the whole Konchu thing is real. Or if it's in his head. Issue 11 gives us the pretty much only character development we see for Frenchie over the entire series. That can't possibly be true, but an ex-girlfriend of his shows up, and Moon Knight helps to save the day. In the 12th issue of the series, 1 year under its belt, we're introduced to Morpheus. And Morpheus is this... I've read this issue a few times, and I still don't quite understand Morpheus. Marlene's brother's a doctor, and he was working with this guy who was having issues, and he gave him this drug, and it took away his eyelids and made him... he's a cool looking character, and then he's got these powers where he can like Darkstar kind of, if that rings a bell. Pull out a D-list superhero to reference. Dark energy. He can control dark energy and stuff, and then he can also do stuff with dreams. Probably besides Bushman, this might be the most memorable villain to come out of this series. And now we're going to take our first foray out of the Moon Knight solo series. We're going to Marvel Team Up Annual number 4, where Spider-Man teams up with Moon Knight, Daredevil, Iron Fist, and Power Man to take on Kilgrave the Purple Man, and Kingpin's in it too. Nothing terrible to note. This is the first time that Moon Knight meets up with Daredevil and Iron Fist and Power Man, so that's kind of cool. And it's always nice to see him mixing around with the other heroes. Fun fact, this is written by Frank Miller. After that, we'll go back to Moench and Sienkiewicz with Moon Knight number 13, where he teams up with Daredevil. This is the first introduction of the Marvel Universe itself into the Moon Knight series. There had been references and things like that here and there, nothing big, but this time we get Daredevil and the Jester. Turns out the Jester has gotten out of prison. Daredevil's like, I'm gonna keep an eye on this guy. His cellmate in prison was just some regular guy that Moon Knight had put away, so Moon Knight's like, well, I want to track this guy down because he's gonna be doing something. So Moon Knight's following Jester, hoping to lead him to this other guy. Daredevil's following the Jester because he's like, I'm gonna put that guy back in jail. And then as soon as Jester attacks a guy, Daredevil swoops in. He's like, oh, that's it. That's your one chance. I'm gonna go beat the crap out of you, put you back in jail. And Moon Knight's like, no, he's leading me to something big. So Moon Knight swoops in and actually fights with Daredevil. He knocks him into an arcade so Daredevil can't hear anything. It was just by luck. Moon Knight ends up kind of getting the best of him, but then they like, oh, actually, let's team up. And it's kind of interesting because they meet here for the first time, even though they just met in Marvel Team Up Annual number 4. Neither one of those references the other one. So anyway, it's a good issue, fun issue. Also of note, right around this time in Fantastic Four number 227, we see Alicia Masters working on a statue of Moon Knight. And then in 229, we get to see the full statue revealed. And the Thing is like, that guy, he's a goof. Why are you making statues of him? Nobody likes Moon Knight. Moon Knight's a phony. It's actually really nice to kind of see that carried over from the Marvel 2-in-1, where Thing is just dismissive of Moon Knight. Back into the Marvel Universe for Moon Knight's 37th appearance ever, his first appearance in an Avengers comic with Avengers number 211. Donald Blake gets dropped off at the Avengers mansion by a taxi that is driven by Jake Lockley, and Jake Lockley's like, where's that scrawny guy going to the Avengers mansion? I should go check it out. Don Blake at the time was the alter ego of Thor. Then he's actually compelled to go in for some reason, and he comes in as Moon Knight, kicks down the door, he's like, hey! And then all of a sudden all these other heroes show up, and it's like, what is going on? And then it turns out Moondragon was like using her mind powers to get everybody there to try and get the Avengers to help her. It was weird. We get a pretty cool fight between Moon Knight and Iceman, of all people, and then eventually they're all like, I'm out of here, this is stupid. And Moon Knight's like, yeah, screw you guys. And he leaves. His next appearance was in Rom number 23. He's a space knight. He's a big robot guy, and he was teamed up with Power Man and Iron Fist for some reason, and the Daily Bugle was like, there's an alien robot menace on the loose. And it just shows different panels, like there's Spider-Man in one panel looking for him, Moon Knight in another panel, Daredevil, Captain America, Iron Man's like, I'm not gonna go out there. If people think there's a robot alien, they might think it's me, so I'm not looking. That was it. There was one panel. Then we're going back to the Moon Knight solo series for issue 14, where we get the first appearance of Stained Glass Scarlet. Again, this is another classic series. Like, if you're going back and looking at a few of these, you know what? In the comments, I'm going to put a list below of the best ones you should read. This is definitely one of them. Stained Glass Scarlet is almost like the Punisher, but not quite. But she's killing bad guys because her son kind of went down that path. It's actually a really good story. I'm not going to spoil it here. There's not much to spoil. Number 15, we meet Zevos. Number 15 was an interesting one. Number 15 was interesting because Moon Knight fights this guy in a giant rat costume. Issue 16 was another interesting one. Nothing of note happened, except right on the cover you can see here, it's like, guest starring The Thing. And there's this kid who really looks up to Moon Knight, and his dad's a cop, and his dad's like, cops are the real heroes, Moon Knight sucks. And then his dad is murdered, but it's an accident, and it's deemed an accident, and no one's really looking into it, and the kid's like, Moon Knight will find who killed my dad. And he finds the Thing coming out of the opera or something with Alicia. And he's like, oh, Mr. The Thing, can you help me get in touch with Moon Knight? My dad was murdered. And the Thing, again, is like, Moon Knight sucks. The Fantastic Four can help you, kid. You're looking for Moon Knight? Get out of here. And then he goes on. The Thing does feel bad. He doesn't team up with Moon Knight, but he sends a message out over the airwaves that Frenchie picks up that's like, hey, look into this. Moon Knight's like, okay, and he goes and saves the day and solves the crime. Actually, at the back of this one, we get our first B story. There's 7 pages by Jack C. Harris. Sienkiewicz did not do the art, and it's actually a story about Mark Spector while he was a mercenary. It's nothing major, but it's kind of neat. Moon Knight made a guest appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 220. Spider-Man and Moon Knight team up and fight some crime. The only thing of note is to fool some bad guys, Frenchie actually puts on a Moon Knight costume. That's kind of neat. In Moon Knight 17, we actually start a story that kind of lasts over 3 issues. We meet Nimrod Strange. In this one, we see that Marlene does take martial arts training with Mark, so she's not completely unskilled. world. Moon Knight fights with some guy named Master Sniper. Moon Knight kind of has less reoccurring villains than the Punisher. He doesn't necessarily kill them all, but like the Blacksmith, Zemos, Master Sniper, like all these characters don't show up in more than one issue here. There's very few that reoccur throughout this series. Outside of Bushman, other characters that did actually show up in other series, like Morpheus or Scarlet, still only had a handful of appearances.
So you've made it this far. Feels like you're enjoying this. If you could hit like, that would really help me out, and I would greatly appreciate it. Issue 18 continues the whole Nimrod Strange story as Moon Knight kind of goes with the government to get caught up in this whole thing. It's over in Israel. Like, it's a big international incident, I guess. Marlene uses some of her skills to actually join Nimrod Strange's all-female bodyguard squad, and she actually kicks the crap out of one of them, showing she is actually capable. In the 19th issue, Nimrod Strange puts on this costume and all this armor and becomes Arsenal, which is a weird-looking villain, but he becomes like, I'm a supervillain now, this is cool. And he grows fond of Marlene and actually starts kissing her and whatnot, and she has to play along with it, even though she doesn't like it. Moon Knight sees this and he's like, oh... he's like, now I got 2 reasons to take you down, Nimrod Strange. You're threatening the whole world, but you kissed my lady. I don't like that. So it's good showing Moon Knight actually does care about Marlene, so he's not completely split. And that jealousy affects him so much that in the 20th issue, when he beats the crap out of Arsenal, he actually pulls up his mask a little bit and spits on him once he's unconscious. And Marlene sees it and he's like, ooh, you know, Marlene, that wasn't very professional of me. I shouldn't have done that. And she's like, nah, it's cool. Like, I get it. He's like, okay. And they defuse the bomb, swim back to shore, and Arsenal wakes up, and he's like, well, I'm going to blow this stuff up anyway. And he blows everything up, except it's just himself and his boat. So he's dead, and that's another villain that won't be coming back. Next time we see Moon Knight was in the original Contest of Champions. Do you guys remember the Contest of Champions? So 1982 is one of Marvel's earliest crossovers, and that, again, just a little aside, goes back to what I was saying about the dense storytelling of the olden days. This was a big event that had every superhero ever in it, and it only took 3 issues to tell the story. Basically, the Grandmaster and the Collector made a bet, like they do, and every superhero from Earth was brought up to this big spaceship, and they got to pick teams. And it shows everybody where they were and what they were doing when they got picked up. And Moon Knight was teaming up with Daredevil, and they're on a helicopter ladder and got teleported away. After that, Moon Knight's seen a couple times in the background, nothing major. He doesn't get selected, so he doesn't show up in issue 2. But in issue 3, he's just very briefly in the background, but that counts as 2 more appearances for the Fist of Vengeance. Moon Knight 21 sees Vincent Alcazar taking over for the art. Bill Sinkwitz probably just needed a break or some time to catch up. Moon Knight fights some zombies, but like not cool zombies, like voodoo zombies. And to do that, he does team up with Brother Voodoo, so there's some novelty there, but not really much else in this issue. Though it does feature a backup story by Alan Zalentes. That's a name you might want to remember for the future, but who knows? I actually do know. This issue doesn't actually have Mark Spector or Moon Knight at all. It's got Konchu. It's just kind of showing how the statue probably does have supernatural powers and can give a bad fate to bad people. Morpheus returns in Moon Knight 22, and this time he's got a better hold on his powers. He's a little stronger, and he's actually like bringing people's nightmares to life. So as Moon Knight has to face off with some of his bad dreams, he gets into a physical fight with Stephen Grant, Jake Lockley, and Mark Spector. So this gives us a good look at what Moon Knight actually thinks of these other 3 personas that he is. He takes out Stephen Grant with one punch, like just boom, nothing. So he doesn't think much of him physically. Jake Lockley's a little more of a fight, and then Mark Spector is the biggest fight he has. And Mark Spector's like, you remember me, right? I'm Mark Spector. You were good enough to wear my skin and live in this body for 20-some years, then you threw me away, and you never used me anymore. Moon Knight ends up winning, and it's a really good issue, like seeing how the mental stuff works with Moon Knight again. And that story continues into 23 with Moon Knight fighting Morpheus. He ends up winning, but there is a cost, as Marlene's brother, Peter, had some new powers that kind of counteracted Morpheus's, and he ended up giving up his life to stop Morpheus, so he died, and Marlene was obviously quite not cool with that. Next up is a sort of team up with Iron Man himself in Iron Man number 161. A bunch of millionaires, including Tony Stark and Stephen Grant, have been invited to some underwater submarine research thing. It's weird. They get down there, and AIM is all like, we got guns and we're taking you hostage for whatever reason. You know, so Stephen Grant's like, boom, and he punches a few of them, and they all get held captive, and Tony Stark's like, I'm gonna become Iron Man, and it's a whole thing. Eventually, they get trapped in an area, and there's this old lady that's like, oh no, I think I'm having a heart attack or something. And they're like, well, there's only room for one person in the escape pod. We should get her in there. And Stephen Grant's like, piss off, everybody. I'm taking it. He just jumps in the escape pod and takes off. Doesn't care what anybody thinks. And Iron Man's outside, like, trying to hold the thing together, and everybody inside's trying to figure out a way to... It's flooding, and they're trying to stop it. But Moon Knight actually goes up, and he fights some bad guys and tracks down the guy that knows how to do everything. So he's up on the surface, like, doing the detective work and actually saving the day. And he finds the guy, and he gets on the comms with Frenchie and patches this guy through, and they explain how to stop the thing and save the day, and Iron Man comes out, and he's like, hooray! And everybody has a big celebration, but Moon Knight's like not really seen after that, so it's whatever. Moon Knight 24 sees the return of Stained Glass Scarlet, and Moon Knight himself really struggles with the whole morality of killing, basically, because Stained Glass Scarlet wants to kill bad people, and Moon Knight's like, well, I should stop her from killing, but at the same time, like, the guy she's gonna kill is really evil, so he really wrestles with that. And at the same time, Marlene's like, Steven, we need to talk, and he's like, not now. He's really ignoring Marlene. Issue 25, it's a milestone issue, it's a double-sized issue, and it's actually one of my personal favorites. We get a new villain in the Black Spectre. He's this guy's an army vet, and he comes back and kind of people are treating him badly, he can't get a job, nothing's going right for him, and he ultimately wants to run for office, but people won't let him because his dad was a former politician. So he becomes a villain. He becomes the Black Spectre, and he models his villainy career after Moon Knight. He's like, oh, so he takes a costume like Moon Knight, but dark. He kind of like Moon Knight's doing this and this and this as a hero, so I'll do this and this and this as a villain. It's a really great issue, but at the same time, his alter ego is running for mayor, and Moon Knight's like the only person that suspects it. He gets Marlene to go, he's like, Marlene, I need you to infiltrate this guy's office. And she's like, no, man, you've been ignoring me, and I'm breaking up with you. And he's like, ooh, okay, I wish you didn't break up with me, but like, can you do this? And she's like, yeah, I'll do this, but then like, that's it. And there's a fight, and like, it's a really good issue. It's one of my favorites. And Marlene does eventually say, like, ooh, you know what, maybe I made a mistake, and she kind of takes him back. Power Man and Iron Fist number 87 takes place in the middle of a big heat wave in New York, and Moon Knight is fighting this low-level thug, and they fight on top of this water tower, and they both fall in, and the guy dies, and Moon Knight is trapped at the bottom of this empty water tower on top of this roof, and nobody can find him, and his earpiece fell off and broke. Frenchie and Marlene actually hire Luke Cage and Iron Fist, the heroes for hire, to find Moon Knight, and they go around, and they're looking for him, they're talking to people, they talk to Crawley. They get caught up in this whole thing, and the low-level thug that Moon Knight was chasing was tied to this guy named Commodore Planet. It was a whole thing. It was written by Denny O'Neil, and eventually they find Moon Knight, just like he's like been in there for a couple of days. He's gonna die, and they pull him out. He sort of sticks around for Power Man and Iron Fist number 88. Iron Fist takes a taxi, and Jake Lockley is the driver. So for those of you keeping track at home, Moon Knight has now had in his cab Captain America, Thor, The Thing, and Iron Fist. I really hope this trend keeps going, because just having Lockley in there is great. And Moon Knight does not show up in the issue. Issue 26 is another really good story. It's another one of my favorites. It actually started as a short because Sienkiewicz was needing breaks, and issues are 30-some issues at this time. He would write some shorter issues and then some backup stories that someone else could do. And one of these he passed on to Sienkiewicz, and Sienkiewicz is like, you know what, we can add to this and actually make it a full issue. And it wasn't quite a full issue, but it was. And Sienkiewicz really wanted to draw it. And it's basically about this guy who reads the newspaper, gets some bad news, and then just starts punching everybody. He's on his way to a funeral home, and he's punching everybody in sight. It's called Hit It. Basically about the cycle of abuse. He's beating the crap out of everybody, and he finally gets to where he was going, which is his funeral home, and he finds that his dad is dead. And his dad was abusive to him as a child, and now he's taking it out on anybody he can because he'll never get the chance to hit him back. And Moon Knight shows up and won't hit him. It's actually a really good issue. For not meaning much in the grand scheme, it's an amazing issue. And then that issue also has a backup written by Denny O'Neil that shows Commodore Planet again, and those are his 2 appearances, so there's a bonus complete history for you. Complete history of Commodore Planet, 2 issues. Issue 27 was written by Stephen Grant, which I always get a kick out of, with art by Joe Brzezowski. If Doug Moench isn't writing it at this time, you kind of think it's not going to be that beefy in the overall art. But it's a good issue. There's a couple of corrupt cops and whatnot. One interesting thing of note is that Moon Knight thinks it's all tied to the Kingpin, and he confronts the Kingpin, and the Kingpin just punches him once and lays him out. And he's like, okay, well, I guess maybe the Kingpin's not involved. I don't want to deal with that. Moon Knight number 28 sees Marlene and Moon Knight return to the original tomb of Konchu, and they go down there, and there's just a whole scheme involved. At this point, Moon Knight's kind of losing some of his faith in Konchu, but not really. But then he goes down there, and he's like, oh, there's things that happened that may have been Konchu, but they may have also just been nothing. So it really, he restores some of his faith in Konchu, but at the same time, we are still left not knowing if Konchu is a real thing or not. Issues 29 and 30, one story, kind of Werewolf by Night comes back, and he's being attacked by this evil cult church thing, and Moon Knight and him team up and they stop it. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, issue number 72, is another one of those one-panel specials. Spider-Man is out because Doc Ock has escaped, and he's looking for him. Then he sees a helicopter, and he swings over, and he's like, sometimes Doc Ock uses a helicopter, and he's like, oh, it's just Moon Knight in his helicopter, and then he swings away. They don't even talk. So Moon Knight number 31, Doug Moench is writing, and Kevin Nolan now is on art. Bill Sienkiewicz is gone. He just went on to do other things. It's really interesting how, like, terrible art can really bring a comic down, and really good art can also, like, lift a comic up. Looking at these now, as deeply as I did, I really appreciated how great Bill Sienkiewicz's art was, but the art throughout the rest of this is good, too. It's another 2-part story. Issue 31 and 32 are both really good. There's a group of street thugs, a gang, and they're kind of roughing up these guys, like, give us protection money, like that. All the shopkeepers and the merchants along the shop kind of get together, and they're like, nah, we're gonna go beat the crap out of these guys, like, this is bogus. And Moon Knight intervenes, and one of the kids is, like, knows the guy that owns a pawn shop, and he's like, oh, he's a really good kid, and he tries to do the right thing. And it's one of those things that, like, also out of the early 80s or mid 80s, like, I feel could have been a really good movie or even like a musical. I don't know. Really good, well-crafted story, and I liked it. Unfortunately, issue 33 was the end of Doug Moench's run on Moon Knight and at Marvel. He had some disagreements with Jim Shooter, and he decided to leave. He got a job at DC. It's all good. He worked for Marvel again. This was his final issue on Moon Knight, his creation. Basically, Moon Knight takes on this big guy, big strong guy, Druid Walsh. He's not necessarily all there. He's kind of harmless. He's a criminal, and he's big and strong, but he's mostly harmless. And then there's a reporter that takes interest in him and kind of basically eggs him on. Moon Knight takes him down. He ends up dying. It's another Moon Knight villain that doesn't show up again. That's a somewhat heavy-handed message about the media staying uninvolved in their stories. It's a good issue. It's not really the big crowning jewel cap that should end such a run like this, but it's where Moench left. Tony Isabella came on for issue 34 with Bo Hampton doing the art. And it's a basic filler story, run of the mill. Moon Knight takes on some drug dealers, and some of the drugs turn this guy into like a wolfman. He fights another wolfman, and it's fine. Issue 35 is still written by Tony Isabella, and Kevin Nolan is back for the art. And to me, this is the start of the new Moon Knight. I really appreciated Moench's whole run, and I'll talk more about that in my closing thoughts. But this, to me, was Moon Knight's coming out party to the whole Marvel universe. It opens with Moon Knight taking on the Fly, a Spider-Man villain. The Fly actually knocks him back, like defeats him in a fight and cripples him, and the Fly takes off to go fight Spider-Man. He never comes back in the issue. And Moon Knight like takes off his mask and he calls Frenchie. He's like, I am hurt. Like his back, I think he broke his back. And he is in a wheelchair for most of the rest of the issue. He goes and he has given up being Moon Knight, and so in turn, by giving up being Moon Knight, he's given up being Jake Lockley. He's given up being Stephen Grant. He's like, I'm just Mark Spector now, and I don't know, like, he kind of says, actually, he's like, maybe I could just be Stephen Grant from now on. Would you like that, Marlene? And Marlene's like, yeah, that's cool. And he's like, okay, good. Like, Konchu allowed this to happen. Konchu's probably not real anyway. And he goes and he's at this Russian dance, and then a mutant shows up named Bora, and she's just basically killing all these Russian ballet dancers. So because of that, like, he still is trying to be involved. He's trying to be the good guy, and he goes and he talks to Professor Xavier of the X-Men. He's like, there's a mutant here. Like, what's going on? How do I deal with this? And Professor Xavier kind of reads his mind. He's like, oh, you're Moon Knight. You got to deal with this on your own to prove it to yourself. And he's kind of like, yeah, but like, can you guys just come anyway? Just for backup, just in case. And he goes, and that is something that's weak. The whole broken backstory, or he can't walk anyway. He kind of just like, nope, sheer determination. I put on my Moon Knight costume and I stand up. And it's like, it's something. To me, it was really rushed. But still, he overcomes that and he can walk again. And he's like, now I have to defeat Bora to prove to myself. And then when we go to the opera, we do see like the X-Men, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Storm. They're all there as unofficial backup. And then the Thing leans over, Benjamin Grimm from the Fantastic Four. And he's like,
what are you guys doing?
and they're like, oh, we're the unofficial backup. He's like,
Oh, okay, I guess Moon Knight wasn't sure because call us the official backup.
and he looks and the whole Fantastic Four are there. And he's like,
They called us just in case.
and then the whole fight breaks out, and Bora's got these wind powers, and Moon Knight ends up taking her on and taking her out, and then the Fantastic Four and the X-Men are like doing crowd control. It's a really great issue, and it brings in the whole Marvel universe. Like, for the first time, it's like, we got the X-Men, we got the Fantastic Four. Moon Knight is now front and center, part of the Marvel universe, not his own little corner. And it's awesome. It's a great issue. And like I said, if you start to distance yourself from Moench's run, starting with this issue, putting him right in the middle of the Marvel universe, where I think he needs to be all along. One of my favorite issues. Alan Zelentes comes on for issue 36. Told you to remember that name. I knew he'd be back. Bo Hampton's doing the art. And this one, he teams up with Doctor Strange, and I had mixed feelings about this one. Alan Zelentes was going to go on to Moon Knight for, well, the foreseeable future. This whole Doctor Strange thing, basically, Marlene has an amulet, and it's cursed by mystical crap, whatever brings Doctor Strange there, and Doctor Strange is trying to help, and he's like, no, Moon Knight, man, I need your help here. Like, you definitely are possessed by a priest of Konchu. Like, you got the spirit in you. Konchu's real. Forget about it. So the whole time that, like, Moench was building up the doubt, like, is Konchu real? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm Moon Knight because I want to be. Maybe I'm Moon Knight because an Egyptian god told me to, and I died. I don't know. And I really liked that, and he was actually kind of doubting it. He's like, yeah, I'm probably just doing this because I want to do it. And then Doctor Strange is like, nah, Egyptian god, yeah, let's do some magics. And they save the day, and they win. And then we come to issue 37 and 38, still Alan Zelentes and Bo Hampton. The final two issues of this Moon Knight run. And Mark Spector's father is dead. Not really that great. There's nothing special. We see Mark's father was a rabbi, and he does admit, as I was trying to solve this and fighting the crime as Moon Knight, Mark Spector became too personally involved. Like, I need to separate these things. Like, maybe I don't need all these identities. And by the end of the issue, he kind of sorts everything out and comes to peace. And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty much just Moon Knight and Mark Spector now, I guess. But, like, I'm also a brand new man. It's a nice closing issue. Not really the whole nice bow on the whole package to end the series that I would have hoped for, but it's certainly not the end of Moon Knight. After that was Marvel Team Up number 144. Moon Knight and Black Costume Spider-Man team up and fight some bad guys. Terry Burkett wrote it. Don't know if he exactly knew what was happening. Nothing happened. Jake Lockley's in it. Crawley shows up, they fight bad guys. Also around this time, but out of continuity, was What If number 34. And it was one of those wacky what ifs that, like, what if the Fantastic Four were bananas? What if Odin was Spider-Man's uncle? And it had 3 different Moon Knight appearances. One was what if Moon Knight got his identities mixed up, and it kind of shows Jake Lockley with a white mask on punching a bad guy. Ha ha ha. Another one was what if the Silver Surfer, White Tiger, Knight Rider, Iceman, and Moon Knight all fought Wendigo during a snowstorm? It was just a white panel. Ha 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 ha. And the last one, just another quick one panel. What if Moon Knight had 3 different identities? An exterminator, a rat fur millionaire, and a comic book editor. Ha 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 ha. Humor was different in the early 80s. Moon Knight's 72nd appearance was another ongoing series called The Fist of Konchu, Moon Knight. The first few issues were written by our friend Alan Zelentes with art by Chris Warner, and it starts up and Moon Knight is no more. He is not Jake Lockley, he's not Stephen Grant, it's Mark Spector, and he is happy. Him and Marlene are happy. They're not doing Moon Knight stuff. They own some art museums and stuff. But of course, over in Egypt, there's some guy that's trying to mess around with the Konchu stuff, and then Mark Spector is awakened in the middle of the night by a dream by Konchu, and it's like, come figure this out, basically, is what he's saying. So Mark Spector's like, hey, I gotta go to Egypt. And Marlene goes with him to the airport and is like, I thought we were done with this. And he's like, yeah, but we're not, I guess. And she's like, no, I guess I'm done with this. And he's like, what are you saying? She's like, if you go to Egypt, I won't be here when you come back. And he's like, huh. Bye. He doesn't actually take it that lightly. But then he has to go to Egypt, and he goes there and he finds this missing tomb of Konchu, and inside are these really old priests, the priests of Konchu, who he didn't know about before. And they're like, hey, check this out. Have a bunch of old new weapons. And he got some new weapons and a new look and a new costume with a mouthpiece on it that I don't actually like. And with that, he got new powers as well. He actually now does gain physical strength from the moon. So full moon, strong. New moon, not as strong. Daytime, also not as strong. But moon, strength. Yes. So of course he takes his new strength, he takes his new weapons, he beats up the bad guy named Anubis the Jackal. And that was Anubis' only appearance. So now we head over to Fist of Konchu number 2. Where he meets Arthur Harrow in his only appearance. I did a whole other video on that where I talked more about this issue than ever needed to be talked about, just because Arthur Harrow is a character in the Moon Knight series that's coming up, but I don't think it's related at all. There's nothing really of note, just the priests of Konchu now kind of speak to Moon Knight and they're like, hey, go do this. They kind of lead him where he needs to be, and this time they send him to Central America to stop some human experiments. Then in Fist of Konchu number 3, Morpheus is back, so we do get to see a familiar face and not a one-off villain. And it's Morpheus. And he kidnaps Marlene because he's like, I killed your brother, and there was history there. And Marlene's like, Mark Spector, help, you're the only one that can help me. And he's like, heck yeah, Moon Knight runs in, saves the day, gets the girl, things go back to normal, this is great. And the priests of Konchu are like, you're being selfish. And he's like, I guess I don't care. I'm going to do my own stuff, but also your stuff. So he argues with them a bit, and he goes, and he fights, and he wins the day. And then Marlene's like, I'm going back to my ex-husband, so bye. Fist of Konchu issue 4 has Moon Knight take on some guy who is crazy in a Blackbeard costume, his only appearance ever. And then he confronts Marlene, and he's like, I'm going to fight for this woman, so tell your ex-husband to move over, I'm going to fight. This gentleman comes up in a wheelchair, and he's just the nicest guy, and he's like, hey, I'm Marlene's ex-husband, we're kind of dating, and how are you? Pleased to meet you. If you're a friend of hers, you're a friend of mine. I'm such a nice guy. And then after this issue, Alan Zelentez and Chris Warner are just gone. I don't know what happened, I couldn't really find out anything, but I'm sure they were fired or taken off the book. And that storyline is just completely dropped. This Marlene's ex-husband is never brought up again. He never shows up, and it's like, well, there's gonna be something interesting there, but nope. Which is fine. This series on a whole is kind of just better left as a footnote anyway. Issue number 5, Joe Duffy comes on as writer. Just like I said, plot lines are dropped, nothing of consequence happens. Moon Knight beats up some bad guys that we never see again. Fist of Konchu number 6, kind of same thing. We got Jim Owsley and Mark Beecham. Moon Knight goes, takes on a drug dealer named Mother White, beats her up, saves the day, listens to the priests. Nothing much of consequence. They're all fine issues, but like I said, on a whole, the Fist of Konchu series is not really worth reading. The 6 issues do their purpose of kind of showing the new direction Moon Knight is headed in, but on a whole, like I said, they're not worth reading. You get the story from what happens in West Coast Avengers anyway, and then eventually this angle is dropped. Moon Knight next appeared in Marvel Age Annual number 1, and I don't actually include this as an appearance because it was just a reprint of a couple pages from some of the Fist of Konchu stuff, and it was just a big hype book, like, here's a couple pages of this, here's a couple pages of this, here's a page of Spider-Man, here's some Wolverine, just basically like, hey, if you're not reading any of these, here's a page or two of them to wet your whistle, so buy our books, and reprinted issues, but Moon Knight was there. So Moon Knight's 78th appearance was in Marvel Fanfare number 30. It was written by Ann Nocenti and directed by Brent Eric Anderson with cinematography by Al Williamson. Yes, I'm reading that because I couldn't remember it. It's done in the style of a film. That's why the artist was a director and the cinematographer. I don't know what they were doing. Marvel Fanfare was one of those kind of things where they just did stories and experimented. It's a semi-generic Moon Knight tale, although I don't know exactly when it is set because he was Stephen Grant and he was with Marlene and they were on vacation and somebody was trying to film a movie and they were hurting the environment. This green lady came out of the woods and she was an earth elemental and Moon Knight saved the day. They took care of it. Nothing of consequence. Okay, so now for the first time I have to talk about issues that didn't have Moon Knight in them because something that happened in them actually affects him. The West Coast Avengers were fighting this guy named Dominus and his crew, and then they got sent back in time, and they went to the Old West. Mockingbird ended up staying in the Old West, while the rest of them got sent back to ancient Egypt. Well, they went back to ancient... The whole thing is a really good story that I should probably dive into in another day. The Avengers that did wind up back in ancient Egypt found themselves in the middle of a war between Rama-Tut and Konchu. Moving forward, I am going to talk a lot about the West Coast Avengers issues, which was a team book, obviously, so a lot of stuff was going on. I'm really only going to focus on the Moon Knight stuff, unless it directly affects him, so some of these might go pretty quickly. In West Coast Avengers 21, Hawkeye died. Didn't intend to do that. Hawkeye apparently died. I think he might have just been knocked out, and Rama-Tut soldiers threw him and the other Avengers into the tomb of Konchu, where the priests of Konchu were, like, from way back when. That's how old they were, apparently. Hawkeye dies at the feet of the Konchu statue, and he speaks with Konchu, and Konchu's like, dude, help me out, be my guy, fight this war for me. And Hawkeye's like, Send me back to the future. And Konchu's like, I don't have that kind of power. He's like, well, figure it out, buddy. And Konchu's like, I got a plan. So Hawkeye agrees to help him. Konchu restores Hawkeye to life. Then, in 1987, seemingly out of nowhere, Moon Knight all of a sudden realizes he has to go to California. In California, in West Coast Avengers number 22, Moon Knight confronts Hank Pym, and Hank Pym asks, how do I know you're Moon Knight? And Moon Knight's like, I don't have a driver's license I can show you, so they fight. A little scuffle ensues, and it's over, and Hank Pym's like, okay, you're Moon Knight, sure. And Moon Knight says to Firebird, take a look in your Bible. And in the Bible, a note falls out that Hawkeye had planted there while he was in the Old West in her great-grandmother's Bible. Like I said, it's a really good story that I should look into deeper on another day. West Coast Avengers number 23, the Fantastic Four join the whole thing, as Hank Pym, Firebird, and Moon Knight go to the Fantastic Four and ask to borrow their time machine. At this point, the Thing's playful dislike of Moon Knight seems to have been dropped. Thing actually has concern for his West Coast Avengers, as he was a part of the team shortly before this. And back in the past, Konchu and the priests actually asked Hawkeye, said, can you make some weapons for us to fight this war? And Hawkeye made the weapons that were eventually passed down to Moon Knight. The weapons that the priests gave Moon Knight in the Fist of Konchu series were made by Hawkeye, and that's kind of neat. With the Fantastic Four's help, Moon Knight, Dr. Pym, and Firebird go back into the past and they save the other Avengers and bring them back to the future. There's a moment where Moon Knight's looking over at the priests and he's like, I know you guys. I met you guys in 1987. This is weird. And I just thought there was really some missed opportunities there for Moon Knight to actually interact with Konchu in the time of Konchu. Maybe that's something that might come up in the future. I'm not sure. Something really cool happened in West Coast Avengers number 29, Moon Knight's 82nd appearance, if you're keeping track still. I mean, it's right here, so. The Avengers and their allies all get back to the regular time, and they go to fight Dominus and all his henchmen, and they beat the crap out of the henchmen. Moon Knight's confused by one guy whose name is just Cactus, and he is a cactus, but who wouldn't be confused by that? Anyway, Dominus gets the upper hand, and he blasts everybody with what he calls a brain blast, and it captures everyone's minds, and they are kind of just stuck. And they're all like, oh no, we're frozen, and then Moon Knight's like, whatever, and he walks out, and he walks up to Dominus, and he's like, smack. And Dominus is like, what? You can't break out of the brain blast, and he blasts him with another brain blast, and Moon Knight's like, sure I can, watch this, and boom, and he knocks him out. And Dominus is like, what? How? And Moon Knight's like, I'm not telling you my secret. Nor does he tell any of the other Avengers his secret, but it's because he has three minds. He's like, oh, that first brain blast took out Jake Lockley. The second brain blast took out Steve Grant. If he'd hit me with a third brain blast, we'd have been screwed. So it's a really playful way to bring up his three minds again. Next up is the West Coast Avengers Annual number 2. And we have the annual West Coast East Coast Avengers softball game. Of course, no Avengers fun time can go off without a hitch, and the Grandmaster shows up and everyone dies, and then both teams, while dead, have to fight each other for their own lives. And Moon Knight ends up beating up Black Knight, and then the whole thing is kind of continued in Avengers Annual 16. But this time, due to further shenanigans, it's the entire assembled Avengers team taking on the Legion of the Unliving, and Moon Knight gets his ass absolutely handed to him by the Green Goblin. But now back to the West Coast with West Coast Avengers number 25. Not a whole lot of Moon Knight stuff. He kind of looks out and he ponders what it might mean to become an Avenger, and he's looking up at the moon. Now that I'm part of the Avengers, there's a chance I could go to the moon. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibilities. I'm a street level guy, but now I'm an Avenger. And then he calls down Frenchie, and he goes up, and he's like, Frenchie, it's time for us to part ways. I'm with the Avengers now, and I don't need an entourage. And Frenchie's like, yeah, I completely understand. I'm going to take off to Nicaragua anyway. I'm going to get some mercenary action. So they part ways. In West Coast Avengers 26, the Zodiac is up to no good. That didn't work at all. Issue number 26 has the Zodiac show up, and they're, of course, up to no good. But Taurus kind of wants to turn on them and help the Avengers defeat them, and because of his study of astrology, Moon Knight believes him.
Haas, you have to stop trying to sing the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song with these West Coast Avengers titles. It doesn't work.
I don't know if I can stop, but I'll try.
In West Coast Avengers number 27, the Zodiac are still doing Zodiac stuff and the Avengers are fighting him, but Moon Knight and Tigra share a kiss and agree to see how it goes. In issue 28, Moon Knight's knowledge of astrology continues to help them fight the Zodiac, and they end up beating them and winning. Hooray! But Taurus goes back on his word to help them and escapes. And that's an insult to the moon. So Moon Knight is pissed. Roger Stern wrote and Bob Hall drew Solo Avengers number 3. The B story featured Moon Knight, and he's on the hunt for Taurus, and he goes to this castle and ends up fighting the Shroud. But the whole thing is just a big setup, because the Shroud was like, I kind of led some crumbs to get you here, because I wanted to test you out, because I want you to join the Night Shift. It was this group of bad guys, but they weren't bad guys, but they were. And Moon Knight's like, no, I just joined the Avengers, so I can't go back on that. I can't join another team, you know? And the Shroud's like, actually, I wanted you to lead them. And Moon Knight's still like, no. And whether you realize it or not, you may have seen a panel from this issue before. It's the one where Moon Knight calls Dracula a big fucking nerd. It says, give me my money, which never actually happened. The panel was from this issue, and somebody else put words over it. In West Coast Avengers number 29, it seems that Moon Knight has made an ally in the Shroud, as the Shroud gives him the location of Taurus. As Moon Knight battles Taurus across the city, we see within his mind that Mark Spector is battling with Jake Lockley and Stephen Grant to actively suppress them within his own subconscious. It's nice to see they're still going with that. So his fight with Taurus does end up in an airplane that he is kicked out of, and he ends up getting caught by while the plane crashes and Taurus is seemingly Iron Man. West Coast Avengers number 30 has the Avengers battling space robots in another dimension. As Moon Knight feels he's getting overwhelmed, Jake Lockley, Stephen Grant, and Mark Spector heads all pop up and say, "We're in another dimension fighting robots, you're out of your league." But Konchu comes out and says, "You got this. Take a look around. We're in another dimension that is filled with moons, and you get your power from the moon, so dig in." Stronger than ever, Moon Knight laughs maniacally as he tears the robots apart with his bare hands. West Coast Avengers number 31, Moon Knight is now having full-on conversations in his head with Konchu, as he and Tigra advance their relationship. And Moon Knight watches on with the other Avengers as Wonder Man battles Akron. Now we head over to Iron Man number 229, where the armor wars are fully underway, and the Avengers go over to tell Iron Man to stop doing what he's doing, and Moon Knight happens to be with them. Because he's with them. Marvel Fanfare number 38. Joe Duffy and Judith Hunt give us what is essentially the 7th issue of Fist of Konchu, as Moon Knight takes on a boy band that is using a magical idol to steal the youth from their fans. Again with Marvel Fanfare number 39, Jake Lockley helps Moon Knight take out a terrorist, and then there is some casual racism. You better believe there's a video coming later about this one. West Coast Avengers 32, Moon Knight and Tigra are still a couple, and Konchu is now kind of living inside Moon Knight's head. And as much as I do say I like to have Moon Knight, like, in the Marvel Universe interacting with all these other heroes, the West Coast Avengers all go on a little mini vacation in their secret identities. So yeah, it's cool to see Moon Knight in these situations, but Mark Spector feels out of place, but maybe it was because he was wearing a weird white safari suit. Anyway, the Avengers fight a giant mutated pre-humanoid named Vetricar, while Moon Knight and Mockingbird sneak off and do something else, but Moon Knight actually stops her from killing a guy, though he does admit he approves of her methods. In the 33rd issue of West Coast Avengers, Moon Knight's 97th appearance, Moon Knight is officially made the 24th Avenger, and then he gets very easily taken out by some guy named El Toro. Issue number 34, near as I can tell, it's right around here that Konchu fully takes over Moon Knight. Mark Spector's gone, Jake, Steven, they're all gone too, and just Moon Knight is now Konchu living inside of Mark Spector's body. The issue gets really interesting because the Avengers are all captured and they're locked in this room, and then his internal monologue, Konchu is like, "This room can't hold a god, I could break out of here anytime I want, but this experience is quite fun," so he doesn't. West Coast Avengers number 35, now Dr. Doom has the Avengers captured. It's actually a 9-year-old boy version of Doctor Doom or something. Comics are weird. But he has the Avengers captured, but he doesn't really know Moon Knight or Tigra, so he's like, well, I'm going to put you guys into a battery of tests to see what I can figure out about you guys. They're essentially put in this danger room where just threats are coming at them from every angle, and they go for about an hour and a half before Moon Knight allows himself to be knocked unconscious so that Konchu's spirit can go free. And the Konchu goes and finds Doctor Doom and is like, "I'm a god, let the Avengers go." And Dr. Doom's like, "I'm gonna let the Avengers go, but it's not because you told me to, it's because I wanted to." And he lets them go. Dun 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 dun. It's the 100th appearance of Moon Knight by my calculations in West Coast Avengers number 36. And nothing really special happened, nobody else was counting. There's this guy named The Voice, and he can control people and tell them what to do. And he tells all the Avengers to kill Hank Pym. Hank Pym runs off and he's got a head start. But of course, Moon Knight cannot be told what to do because right now he is a god living in a man's body. So Konchu's like, I'm not going to go along with this, but at the same time, I can't not look like I'm going along with it because I don't want the Avengers to know that I'm Konchu. I've taken over their teammate's body. So he goes along with it, but not really. He kind of distracts a couple of the other Avengers because he does say, like, I can't let my fellow Avenger be harmed. So Konchu himself feels like he's the Avenger in this situation, and these are his teammates. Pretty fun. Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. number 2 was this close to being Moon Knight's 100th appearance. Thankfully it wasn't, because nothing really happens. Nick Fury is caught up in whatever he's caught up in, and some other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents go to the Avengers and they say, don't interfere in whatever's happening here. I didn't read it all, so I don't know. But just like that, they also say that to the West Coast Avengers, that Moon Knight is there. No words, just there. So in West Coast Avengers number 37, there's a big debate about killing and how Avengers aren't supposed to kill because way back in the Old West, Mockingbird actually accidentally killed the Phantom Rider. Not really, she led him to kill himself through an accident, but the Avengers aren't supposed to kill. But of course, Konchu is a god of vengeance, so he's like, killing needs to happen sometimes. Mockingbird is a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent and a spy, and she understands that sometimes killing is essential. And Tigra is a werecat, so she's like, my primal instinct is to kill, to hunt. So the three of them actually separate from the Avengers and start their own mini-team. Which takes us to West Coast Avengers Annual number 3, and stuff happens in the A story, but then there's the B story, which has Moon Knight. The trio of former Avengers actually go to the Savage Land to meet Kazar and his wife and kid, and Konchu apparently doesn't like babies. They do battle with the High Evolutionary, and Konchu is getting a little frustrated with the limits of a human body. He's like, I am a god, and this body is human. Why does it have to be so human? Ah, damn this humanness, holding me back. And Tigra actually notices a little bit. She's like, something a little off about you lately, Mark. West Coast Avengers 39, Mockingbird, Moon Knight, and Tigra are still off doing their thing, and they have a little discussion about how killing should work still. They don't want to do it all the time, but they do understand it's acceptable. And then they have a little fight with the Phantom Rider, and Konchu again is like, oh man, this human body is weak and slow, and I don't like it. But at the same time, fighting under these limitations is quite exhilarating, so he's having a good time with it. Steve Englehart and Al Milgrom did like all the West Coast Avengers stuff, if I didn't mention that before. But Marvel was moving in a new direction, and John Byrne was actually coming on, and I think Steve Englehart left. So some of the storylines kind of don't get followed up on, and it's a real shame when they do that. But like John Byrne at the time was like a celebrity in the comics world, and he's coming on to West Coast Avengers. Oh, it's a big deal. Just whatever, get out of here, Englehart. So issue 40, Al Milgrom still did the art, but Mark Gruenwald did the writing. Nothing really much happens. The three former Avengers they're using the Mooncopter, so that's kind of neat, and they go to track down the Shroud in the base that Moon Knight fought him in before, and they just kind of find some details and stuff. Nothing really happens. Tom DeFalco and Ralph Macchio wrote the last issue we're going to look at today, while Tom Morgan did the art. It's West Coast Avengers 41. And this one had a lot going on. To start off, these Egyptian god hunters started hunting down Norse gods, and that was tangential to what was happening. The West Coast Avengers go, and they got to get the Phantom Rider to stop haunting Bobby, so they go to Damian Hellstrom to perform an exorcism on the guy who he's inhabiting right now, and they do that, and they form the circle, and then these ghosts come out, and then at a moment where they're not looking, kind of Hellstrom zaps Konchu out of Moon Knight as well. It's like, we need a god to fight these ghosts, and Moon Knight is like unconscious, and Konchu's blasted out, and he's like, you ghosts stop fighting right now, and takes care of that, and then all of a sudden these Egyptian god things sent by Seth show up, and everybody just starts fighting everybody. And they actually rip all the gold stuff off of Moon Knight and make his costume kind of back to the more classic look we were used to, thus signifying an end to this era. And everybody wins and stuff, and Konchu's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go deal with these gods, man. I might die. So Moon Knight, just keep doing what you're doing in my name, but it's time for me to leave you alone for a bit. I took your body. I had a good time. You paid the price. That was bad, I guess. Whatever. Bye. And then Moon Knight's like, well, shit. I just came face to face with my god, and I'm not sure I liked who it was, but, so I'm gonna leave the Avengers. And Tigra's like, hey, remember me? And Moon Knight's like, I'm leaving. You too. Bye. It's not really stated. It's kind of subtly hinted upon that Tigra was more something that Konchu was doing, and Mark Spector wasn't. Even though when it started, it was very clear, like, Mark Spector even told Konchu, like, nah, man, you just don't understand some things. I want to have a relationship with a Catwoman. But it seems like by the end, Moon Knight, Mark Spector was just like, maybe he was just completely addled in the brain and was just like, I gotta get out of here. But it seemed like he was like, get your hand off me, he says to her at one point. Like, it seemed like the relationship was Konchu's. Which is weird, because Tigra also, much later during Secret Invasion, would have a relationship with Hank Pym, who was a Skrull. So she's continually having relationships with people she doesn't think she's having relationships with. That's something for down the road if I do the complete history of Tigra. Anyway, yes, Moon Knight and the Avengers part ways. So you can really see how my editing and hair levels have changed over the time. Anyway, thank you very much for enjoying that. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, whatnot. Subscribe, because there's more Moon Knight stuff coming in the future. I'm going to keep reading all these comics, because they need to be read, and there's still a butt-ton of them. But I was racing to get them all read before the Moon Knight series, but that didn't happen, obviously. So the regularity with which these videos comes out might slow down, it might not. I don't know. I'm going to keep reading them, I'm going to keep making videos, I'm going to keep having fun. Music is the Clerics of Ohm. Check out their channel. An hour of one song might have been a bit much. I don't know. But, toodaloo, thank you for sticking around this whole time.